Hello ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, my name is 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 this channel. It's one of the days of the Vlogmas. So today I wanted to do a wrap-up of all the books I read throughout the year of 2021 that were not graphic novels, because in 2021, as I already spoke a lot about in this channel, I had this challenge of reading 365 graphic novels, so one graphic novel per day. But anyways, somehow I ended up reading a bit of non-graphic works, so fiction and non-fiction. And now we will start with fiction, and then there will be separate video for non-fiction. The thing is, I was filming this kind of non-graphic books wrap-ups throughout the year, so according to each season, this will be like a compilation of the previous videos I already filmed and of books I read recently in winter and I want to share with you. Fried green tomatoes at the Whistle Shop Cafe by Fannie Flagg. That's a Russian translation of it. The translation was not good. The quality of this book, I shouldn't say this. That's a present. So forget. Okay, forget. But it has like two layers of story. First is 1980s, two women in a nursing house. One is going through her middle-age crisis, and she is starting this weird friendship with an older woman who is in a nursing house, and she is telling her a lot of stories about her younger years, about the family who raised her in the age of the Great Depression in the US, and how they were living in this small town called Whistle Stop, and how this family, the dynamic within this family, different parts of the family. I forgot the main reason why I don't have flowers today, because I need to help books. I'm so sorry. Okay, I will get used to it, okay? Because everyone is just flexing their books and booktube, so I'm gonna do like this as well. So now I will do all this gesticulation with the book. Actually, that's a good sound. So and she's telling this woman, middle-aged woman who is going through her middle-age crisis, about her young years, and she's encouraging her to be more liberated, to be more free in her thoughts, to be more relaxed, because the younger woman, she's thinking about ending her life, and of course the older woman trying to encourage her and telling her different stories of this. I guess I should center myself better. Of this, of the town she grew up in, and that's a really heartwarming book. It has a lot of intrigue, and I was not expecting some of it. I literally was shocked and shocked when the main intrigue, the main plot line was offered to me. I was shocked, because this book was recommended to me as a very sweet little book about delicious and rich writing of Southern American cuisine, and it contained it, because Whistle Stop Cafe, there were a lot of things cooking, and there are a lot of meals described, and there are some recipes at the end. But if you watched or if you read the book, you know the intrigue, the main plot line, and it was shocking for me, but anyway, good for them, but it wasn't appetizing, and if you are going into this book, you just should know that there are some parts of it that is very, very weird, as for me, but it was okay. I cried once. I was reading it in a public place, and I cried. And it was very weird, because for me, from my experience as a reader, because I was reading about this scene about a little girl who is fallen ill, but she wanted to be the circus so much, and she wanted to see the elephant. So one of the heroes of this book, I mean, it's all happened during the, after the ages after the age of Great Depression, and one of the main heroines of the book is bringing the elephant to this girl who is sick right now, and it was such a heartwarming and such a intense moment in the book that I just cried, and I was a bit ashamed because people was looking at me, but that's just I like this book. I gave it 5 stars because it was great reading experience for me, and it's not necessarily the greatest book I ever read. It's not maybe the best fiction out there, but it was a good heartwarming story, and I had I had a lot of emotions going through this book. The next book, I don't have a physical copy of it. It was a Gramma by Stephen King. It was a little short story by him telling about a boy who lives with his older brother and mom and their ill grandma. And one day he has to stay with his grandmother while his mom is gone to do something else. I guess the elder brother broke his leg or something, and the mom going to hospital with him. Light left us completely. The same as in the story, because I was terrified to read about it. It was very weird feeling for me that someone's grandmother is that evil, and of course, all of this Stephen King mystique and horror happening, and it has a very shaken ending, and I like the story. I like that it's short because I don't think I would survive through the whole whole novel on this topic or by Stephen King. The next one was Star Child, a fable by Oscar Wilde. First of all, Wilde's humor is so good, and even in his short stories is just amazing. That's a very popular fairy tale that always referred to as a Christmas fairy tale. I did not get this reference because I never read it up to this point, and I read it while I was reading my brother's school book, and there was this story, and I read it, and I did not understand the connection between this and Christmas. Only thing that was reminding of a Christmas in this story that was that this guy, this little child, a very, very exceptional, beautiful little child, was found in the woods. He is growing into exceptionally cruel and rude and selfish boy, but he is found in the woods in the Christmas night. So I guess that's the relationships with Christmas. It was a bit of strange moral in this tale for me because there was no reward for the parents for his, adopted family, for the people who actually raised him in the end. So it was a bit weird, and I was confused why it's carrying such a huge Christmas vibe for so many people. The next one was Lobo, the Wolf, King of Currumpaw. I hope it's pronounced right. Currumpaw by Ernest Thompson Seton, which is based on author's personal experience on hunting wolves. And as you can understand from this sentence, the story is about hunting wolves. In general, me as a majority of the people, I guess, who have some compassion towards the animals, I don't specifically like, and I don't specifically choose precisely, stories about animals, because in majority of the stories, animals are hurt, animals are, something happening with them, someone hunting them, someone is abusing them. So it's not a pleasurable read for me, but it was also in the school book, and it was there, and I guess it's a bit, it's a good naturalistic view on the wild nature and how people are connected with it and how it is influencing people. But at the same time, for me, it was a bit it's a bit old-fashioned, because it basically teaching you the compassion towards animals, and it's educational in some way, but in a very old-fashioned way, like I guess for the age where it was written, it was very good and very great story to develop these feelings towards, you know, we all united, we all live in the life in this planet type of thing in a child's mind. But by now it's just a sad story about sad times where people and wild animals were so interconnected, were so connected between each other, and it was just a game of survival. The next one was 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 Actually, maybe first and the last one. It's, you know, this Franklin the Turtle. It's a very famous, I guess it's a cartoon. I know just a little bit of Polish, so it was a bit hard for me to read it, but I read it twice. First time it was, you know, the first draft of my reading, and then a second time I understood more because I just knew what I'm going into, you know. And the story in English called Franklin Plays the Game, so it's basically about this little turtle learning their football strategy. It's easy to read, it's 5+, it's for age 5+, so I was okay. If You Can, We Can by Beth Shoshan and Petra Brown. Petra Brown did the art. It was really sweet story about a little rabbit and his mama, and they were always together, and they were beautifully illustrated, and it just gave you such a warm feeling of belonging to someone. And the next two was from the one series, 10 in the Meadow and 10 in the Den by John Butler, which both has this Butleresque style, like very concrete, you know, how he drew animals in this series, very recognizable, and I liked it. It was cute, and both of the books are focused on learning counting. Short story by Isaac Asimov, which is called Green Patches. I read it in Ukrainian translation, very good Ukrainian translation, and it was amazing. That's the first Isaac Asimov short story or work in general that I read in my whole life, and I'm regretting not reading anything from him up to this point, because if this short story can be so fascinating and the concept of it is so great and so, you know, intriguing, and I'm so moved and I'm at the edge of my seat. If he can make me feel all the feels in 20 pages, I'm wondering what will happen with me if I read his bigger works. I was impressed, honestly. I was so impressed. It's the story that was written in 1950s. Little things in this story are so big, are so important, and I was living my best life when I was reading these 20 pages. 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 Day by Jeff Bridges and Isabelle Bridges Boesch. Isabelle Bridges. And I mean, look, I didn't know that Jeff Bridges is an actor, and this woman who draws this book is his daughter before I started reading this book. After I read it and I was like, what? How would it get published? I googled the name, and you know, I understood his author, his actor, his singer, his producer. I'm very suspicious to books that famous figures are writing, because, you know, in general these books are not that great, that they are made for their fans to buy. I didn't know who is the audience of this children book, because it's a book for children, it's a short story, awfully illustrated by the daughter of this actor. I am sorry, I am no one to criticize the art, because I'm not an artist myself, but I don't know how to do the skill, but it was awful. It was just ugly, straight away ugly. There was no cuteness in this ugliness, you know. It wasn't like a children vibe of ugly. No, that was just straightforwardly ugly. And it was very strange. Like, also, don't try to put 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 on the Goodreads, because you will see a lot of stuff you don't want to see. But aside from that, it's not a book's problem. The book's problem is the art. I mean, the story is very basic, like the daughter waking the dad up, and she has this idea that on their weekends they will have daddy-daughter day, and he will, you know, just spend more time with her because she probably miss him. But how was it drawn? It was so weird. First of all, when she's waking him up, he's sleeping naked. Then, when they're doing something together, he's sitting in the way, like, you know, the way plumbers sitting, and at least in Ukraine they have this problem, like the workers have this problem that sometimes they have the half of the ass shown, you know, in the jeans or in the pants, and the father had this problem as well. But why you need to emphasize on it in a children's book, which is like, I don't know, 15 pages long? Why do we need these details? Like, and especially draw in such a awful way. It's not like realistic style of drawing or something. You could just skip over it and just, you know, draw something else, but she didn't. And it was really, really weird. I didn't like it at all. um don't ask me why I read it. I was hoping for some, you know, cutesy little children's story to read before sleep, but it wasn't it, and I should have known better because I saw the cover. The cover is ugly, let's be honest, and all of the art is like this. So that's just my stupidity. That's not a problem with the book. I just shouldn't have to pick it up at the first place. The next thing I read was The Mirror of Love by Alan Moore and José Villarrubia. I love the poetry in it. It's basically a book with one poem by Alan Moore about LGBTQ community and how historically many artists and the history of LGBTQ people and community, and how the history progressed, and how the views on these issues progressed, and how is it now. And it's all structured in a way that you get in a lot of information about a lot of history events and historical personalities. It's a very, very good poem to start with LGBTQ history if you as me don't know much. It was a good starting point. I loved the poem itself. I loved the book and how it was published, because it's published with photography of José Villarrubia that illustrated the text, and it was very, very accurate and very poetic. I also like the introduction by David Drake that was telling about on stage performance that was initially that they with José Villarrubia initially made on The Mirror of Love, and how it was structured as, you know, one lover telling this poem to another one after, you know, night spent together, and how much work they put into this stage performance. Next book I read was A Snow Glass Apple, retelling of Snow White by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Colleen Doran, who was inspired by Harry Clarke style in his illustrations. You can see in this book how many work and passion Colleen Doran had for Harry Clarke, and had for making the art in this book as perfect as he could. It was just breathtaking. I was amazed. I was surprised. The story itself is very, very magical and so unique. I enjoyed it a lot. It's very dark grim. It's not for children. It's an adult retelling, and it's, you know, using a lot of. There is not a lot of adult things, but sometimes there is some occasional blood. But it was such a new and exciting idea for me. And what I also loved is the essay at the end of it, how Colin Doran explained the influences he had over to create certain illustrations, and if you would compare certain parts of the book with Harry Clarke's works. By the way, it's the first book by Neil Gaiman I read in my life, so I guess I will continue because I enjoyed it a lot. Last book I read was this little poetry collection called About Love by Vladimir Vysotsky, who is Soviet singer and songwriter. Collected poems of Mikhail Matuszewski, who was born in the city of my origin in Ukraine, in Lugansk. He was writing songs and poems and in Russian, and he became very, very popular and well-known, well-recognized Soviet songwriter. So I was reading his collected poems and I was having emotional breakdown that spring because I remember there were poems about nuclear tragedy in Hiroshima, about Second World War, because he was a correspondent of a Soviet magazine during some actions, and he was actively participated in war. He was writing poems about war, so it was so emotionally draining for me to read this collected volume. Ooh, it was a lot, and I remember I was just stuck in this place, very deep in this memories of human tragedies, and especially, you know, poetry. You know, he's just very good with words, so he was expressing all of it in a very persuasive and very touching manner that was just entering my brain and entering my soul and staying there for days. And then I decided, okay, I need to read something else, something maybe about children, about something more childish, kind of. But then in spring, I picked the wrong book for this. I read Henry Rock's Another Chance to Get It Right, which was in fact non-fiction about children and childhood, but it was not sweet at all. Okay, maybe I'm wrong in my wording now, because it was very touching. It was very important to read. I don't like to describe books like this because, you know, when people are saying, oh, that book is important, it's like, it's very generic description, but I would dare to say that this book really is, because it is talking about protecting children, responsibilities of us as a collective society to care about our youth, about childhood trauma, childhood abuse, abuse of power from parents and adults regarding to children, about neglect, about very traumatic events and situations that can happen with children, like very serious traumatic events. And this book is basically a call for action and is motivation and inspiration for all parents, all members of the society, and especially for people who work with children in places where they can reach children and help children to do their job in the right way, and to reach out and to help those in need, and to watch out for kids in their life and for kids who they see around. It is a very powerful read. I was crying all along. It's done in a form of essays, poetry, some alternative, I would say, think pieces, and some philosophical, allegorical, metaphorical, beautiful quotations and essays. There were also graphic works, like a little bit of comics and a little bit of illustrations. And in general, this book impacted me a lot. I think it should be read by every adult. It's not a book for kids, it's a book about kids and about childhood. Then I read Lyrical Epigrams of Samuel Marshak, Howl by Allen Ginsberg, and I know how important it is, and I read it actually 3 times. Of course, I wasn't that petty and anal to mark it on Goodreads 3 times. but I basically ended up reading it 3 times, because first I read it in original, just in the text, you know, then I read it in translation, and then I listened to it narrated by Allen Ginsberg himself on YouTube while reading to the text of the poem. So it was kind of a harder read for me because it's very complex and obviously very deep, but my English level is kind of, you know, not as high as Allen Ginsberg, and I had some struggles with understanding it. Maybe that's why I needed 3 times of listening to it, but I ended up loving it. And then I read something I didn't end up loving at all. I read a collected volume. What I'm saying collected volume every time. It's my mind is just thinking in graphic novels terms from this time after this year of this experiment of reading graphic novels. Okay, I read like a collection of Russian folk songs. I read it to compare with Ukrainian folk songs and see if they're actually as similar as some people say, and I would say no, they are not at all. And it was not pleasurable reading. Petty things I did in spring. I forgot to mention the first book I read, summer of 2021, was Mikhail Bulgakov's Master and Margarita, which you probably know who Mikhail Bulgakov is, right? He's very famous Russian-speaking Ukrainian writer. He used to be, obviously. And Master and Margarita is a cult classic of his. It's basically what you call a magical realism, but also heavily based on Christian mythology and Soviet reality at the same time. So it was a really fun read, and I liked the in-depth essay afterwards of how Bulgakov was really deep into history of Catharism and really bloody events of Albigensian Crusade in 12th to 14th century Southern Europe. So he was connecting some characters and facts from the book, from the fictional book, to these historical facts, and showing how Mikhail Bulgakov could know about it and could have taken some metaphors and inspiration from this particular period of time and this particular bloody events. And I liked it because I never studied this history of this religious movement or this period of time deeply, and I wouldn't be ashamed to say I hardly studied it at all at school. So it was interesting for me to understand this new information and search about it myself. And also I loved the illustrations in the edition I was borrowing from the library. And to be completely honest, I picked it in the library because of the illustrations. You can see on the screen exact edition that I was reading, and it was nice. But now let's go to the different books I read in summer, which I did not forget when I was wrapping up the summer non-graphic reads, unlike the poor Bulgakov, who I did forget. So first things first, I read 3 short stories for children by Beatrix Potter. The Tale of Peter Rabbit, The Tale of Mrs. 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓮𝓭, and The Tale of Mrs. Tittlemaus. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They were written in the beginning of 20th century. It's a well-known children classics about cozy little world of tiny animals doing their tiny things, and that was a great distraction for me. I love to read about little worlds. I have a whole Pinterest board dedicated to all of these illustrations about animals living their animal lives, but you know, wearing human clothes and doing human chores because it motivates me, it inspires me to do cleaning, washing dishes, doing laundry, taking a walk, you know, all of these normal everyday things. When I see little animals dressed up as humans doing the same, I want to be like them. And also I was reading all of the stories right before going to the bed, and that way I secured my own good dreams because it's just so cozy, so little, so tiny, and really, really nice and sweet. So I enjoyed it a lot, as you see, and that's a childhood classic for a reason. So next one I read, again, a book in Ukrainian. It's not translated to English, and I don't think it ever will be. It's Микола Живенський poetry collection віршиків «Кілька для Назарчика та Матійка», with art by Oksana Drachkovska. And Mykola Zhilinsky is basically Ukrainian academic, highly acclaimed academic, professor of and head of Institute of Ukrainian Literature. He's 80 years old, and he put aside all of the work he has, all of the writing of scientific articles and you know, his projects to write about his twins grandkids that he really, really loved, and I loved it. I loved the spirit in it. So it's called A Few Poetries for Nazarchik and Matika. I think it was really sweet. Oksana Drachkovska's art was amazing, as always. I can understand how this collection was very, very important, very big thing for the family, for the grandkids when they grew up, but I don't think it was necessarily very important for the general public, even though, you know, this children poetry, it's not bad, it's not good, it's just neutral. At least I had a very neutral opinion on the quality of the poetry, and it wasn't bad, but it also wasn't something, you know, that I would necessarily buy for my kids when I have them in the future. The next I read selected stories by Lazar Karman. He was a Jewish Ukrainian writer in the beginning of 20th century. He was living in Odessa, and of course Russians are claiming it's Russian writer. Yeah, he's Lazar Yosberovich Kornman, very Russian. He is Jewish Ukrainian. And next I read Why Art by Eleanor Davis, which was a very interesting read for me. It was how can I describe it even? It's a very whimsical text and very whimsical art coming together to show a story that can help you reflect and discuss on what's art and why art. And it's a great starting point to discuss and to reflect on these things in the group of students, for yourself, in your own you know, perspective. It can help you to form opinion about art and your place in it, if you have one, if you are a creative person. I really enjoyed it. It was very absurd, it was very metaphorical, it was very deep, and it has a lot of meanings to it, so I would gladly read it again, maybe a few times. Previous to this work, Why Art, I read only one book by Eleanor Davis, and it was a nice collection of graphic short stories, but this one was really something else. I enjoyed it very, very much, and I recommend it. Highly, highly recommended for every person who ever created something, who had a creative profession, who had any desire to be creative and to create art in any form of it, and for someone who is actually not very sure of what they're doing and should they step into you know, being on a place where they can create something, and for someone who have insecurities about their art and what they are doing with their life. So that's just a very broad description, because I cannot actually describe the plot of it, because the plot of it is not what it seems to be. And it's a rather short, highly illustrated. Highly illustrated. Why I'm keeping saying this? I mean, illustrated in abundance also sounds really strange. I mean, you know what I mean. It has a lot of illustrations, and these illustrations are in high quality. That's what I wanted to say. Then I read a picture book for kids by Tony Sandoval, a Mexican artist who has a very specific art style, you know, these big heads and eyes and whimsical creatures around the characters. I'm pretty sure you have seen at least one of his works, and I finally got one in my hands as well. It was The Windy Day, about a tiny girl in a great, huge, dark forest surrounded by monsters, and then this tiny girl on a beach full of goblins, and she's just want to play with her kite, but will she? In autumn, I read only one book, which was not even book, it was like two short stories in one collection, by Roman Dirge. It was called The Cat with a Really Big Head, and one other story that isn't as good, but I would dare to argue that both of the stories weren't that good, because it was just very strange. I read it because of the illustrations, because it was very Tim Burton-esque. It was so short, it was like 30 pages or something, but it was heavily illustrated, you know. And I was just looking at this illustration and I was like, really? Okay. It wasn't that good for me mentally, because these images of this huge head cat, or this story, I don't even remember about what it was. I remember it was so weird. It was so, like, I would never buy this kind of book to my kids, and I honestly don't even think I mean, this time, this, I don't know, 15 minutes or 20 minutes that I spent reading this short book was worth it. Maybe I should have just stared at my wall, and it would just give me more relief than reading this book. In winter, I read 3 really short children books, and it was A Tale of Two Cats by Aim Hillel and Shimrit El-Kanati, which was basically nursery rhyme about 2 cats, and the illustrations was really cute. The nursery rhyme itself, it was very basic, and I didn't catch a lot of rhymes in there. Maybe I'm just pronouncing English words in my head in the wrong way. Probably I am, but if we will compare this example with Dr. Seuss, I can easily spot the rhyme, and even he is creating so many unknown words, you know, like non-existent English words. Anyways, I just like it, and I can easily see how is it rhyming, but in this case, in case of A Tale of Two Cats, I just couldn't. Then I read a very famous childhood classic by Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are, and I mean, I'm so glad I finally read it, because with my friends, you know, English-speaking friends, when we are going to bookshop together, and they're always, you know, picking up some children books and saying, oh yeah, I read it in my childhood, and all of these things I didn't read in my childhood because they are not translated to Ukrainian, and we don't have this kind of books in Ukraine. We have our own like childhood classics, which are probably not translated to English, but anyways, it was a good read. I loved it. It was really short, rhymey, and illustration were just top notch. I understand why this is the first in the 100 the most important children books list of in New York Times, and I will continue reading childhood books like English classics for children, and picture books, and chapter books even, because I think it's important to understand this level of culture. I would say this layer, not level, of culture to also understand some jokes or some allegories in different works, because we all are coming from our childhood, and to understand the culture, I think you need to go deeper there to see how things worked for people who were kids and now you're speaking with them as adults. And in this point, I want to say Dr. Seuss, books of whom was, as I understand, a huge part of many English-speaking children's childhood. Oh, he had some really strange fantasy. I liked it, okay, but I understand that's also like a cult classic. I read On Beyond Zebra. It was okay. I know that it's one of the books that they were not like cancelled, but the foundation of Dr. Seuss, who has rights for these books to be published and republished, basically, they said, as I remember, they said this particular book, together with the other books, will not be published again because they found the context harming or something. I didn't really get it. I'm trying to not focus too much on this. I think every country, every culture has their own things going on, and it's okay. I'm catching up with mine, I'm catching up with others, but I'm not taking a very strong stance in, you know, in things that belong to other cultures. So anyways, I read it. I didn't find any content there like very questionable. Maybe man on a camel like creature was too reminiscent of Middle Easterns. That's why they decided not to republish it again. But I don't know. Anyways, the rhymes were okay, but I would say it is strange. The art is strange, the rhymes are strange, the books are strange, really strange for me. So, I mean, I'm enjoying. I wouldn't say I'm not, but at the same time, I have, you know, sometimes passing on something like if I'm thinking some English speaking person doing something weird or saying something weird, I have weird ideas about world, I'm like, oh, maybe that's because of Dr. Seuss. Maybe I'm biased now in this way, I don't know, but I will continue reading him, and I'm planning to do kind of a video of me wrapping up my Dr. Seuss reading journey. Thank you so much for your attention. That will be the conclusion of this wrap up of fictional non-graphic books. Thank you so much again, and I'm kissing you, and see you tomorrow. Bye.